we'd like to thank the 145 speakers. I won't make you all stand up. And our poster presenters for sharing your work and your insight with us. So thank you for joining us. We'd also like to thank our Ounce of Prevention Fund planning team who put this together. So I will ask you to give them a round of applause too. We're very excited to have over 725 attendees this year. Yeah, right? We have, and 300 of you are new to the summit. So we're very excited to have you here with us. We have representation from all 50 states, including DC, Guam, and as you can see from the slide, we are well represented across the globe. So we're extremely happy about that. This year's summit had some new features. We had our first set of in-person community of practice meetings yesterday. If you didn't have a chance to sign up for one of the COPs, they run virtually throughout the year, and then we come together at the summit to meet in person. So if you'd like to register for one of those, we can help you do that. We also had our reception and poster session last night. How many of you were able to attend? Nice. We had a fabulous turnout. We were really excited to have you all with us. Some great posters. We did, and I also just want to let you know we have 28 unique workshops, and we have wonderful plenary sessions coming up, so stay tuned for those. We really tried hard to accommodate those of you who registered in advance for your sessions, but if you didn't have that opportunity, it's okay. We'll let you stay, it's okay. Just, make your way to the rooms that you would like to attend, and be mindful of crowds, and if you need any assistance, please see our wonderful team at the registration desk. Directly following this plenary session, our first set of workshops will begin. And so you'll be walking to your rooms as needed. And then afterward, we'll come back together for our lunch plenary session here in this room. Now, we know many of you have some dietary restrictions. And for those of you who let us know that in advance, on the back of your name tag, you should see a card. I think it's purple this year. Please put that out on the table when you come back for lunch so that we can make sure you get what you need. I have a lot of notes. I've got a lot of talking points, so hold on just a second. Make sure you're well taken care of. After that, you'll head to your sessions. We want to make sure that we get your feedback this year. We have a mobile app, which I'll talk about in just a minute, and within that is an evaluation for each of our sessions. We'd love to have your feedback. We actually really use that feedback to enhance the summit from year to year, so please make sure that you use the app. Speaking of, if you haven't downloaded the app, you need to. It's really cool. So we have, it's something that can help you figure out where your sessions are. You can communicate and connect with other people, and it helps with a map. I mean, there's everything on there. If you have not downloaded the app and you need help, please see Catherine at the registration desk. She is amazing and can help you out with that right away. You'll also know that we are having a little contest with the app this year. So you'll want to download it and use it early and often, because the more you use it, the more points you get, and there may be a prize in your future. And I've heard they're really good. So please use the app, and if you have trouble with it, let us know, and we'll help you with that. All right, so I think that's it for my notes. I would like to, at this point, introduce the president of the Ounce of Prevention Fund, Diana Rauner. She's with us today. That's it? Okay. Welcome, Diana.
Good morning. So this, I have to say, I came in yesterday, and I know this is a really big hotel, but it felt like a village. And it was so great to just see people all over the place connecting and talking, and the energy was really palpable. It's so exciting to be here. I want to second, first of all, a shout out to the fabulous event staff here from the Ounce of Prevention Fund, because they've just done a beautiful job. So I just have to say thank you again to them. And of course, I want to second Kelly's thank you to our philanthropic partners, to the Isaac Simons Foundation, the RWJ Foundation, and the Pritzker Children's Initiative for bringing us together in this global village here and having the opportunity to have these days together, which is so exciting. So thank you very much for making the time to do this. The first thing I'd like to do is just acknowledge yesterday was, of course, do I move this myself? Alexis, are you? Okay, thank you. Just as well. Yesterday was a busy day. Obviously, we had Hark, but we also had the opportunity for many to visit on the Hill, and we never thought we'd be doing this at this point, but here we are with MCV not yet reauthorized, and we cannot let up. We must continue at every possible opportunity to ensure that every member of Congress understands the importance and the urgency of renewing MCV. So thank you very much for everyone who took the time yesterday and has been taking the time over many months to continue to advocate in addition to your day jobs. I also want to acknowledge we have created a special hashtag for the summit that we put together, and we want to make sure that we use the time that we're all here together in Washington to draw attention to the importance of MCV, the urgency of MCV. So again, if we can use social media to encourage our to bring light to this, please continue to do that. So if you are able to use social media, and I would say if, because I'm not the world's greatest, but many of us are here, if you can use that to continue to advocate, it will be great. We will have to continue to do this until it is done, and it will be done. We will not give up, and so thank you for doing that. And of course, there are many millennials here, but also policy and advocacy specialists, our team from the First 5 Years Fund, who can help with some of the, with using the social media. So, next, I wanted to take a minute as well to just acknowledge the very exciting work of our communities of practice. And this, again, is an initiative which really arose organically at last year's summit. We learned how much there is for us to share and how much hunger there is really for the connecting and communicating that we do both face-to-face but over the throughout the year. And if there's one thing that we hope we're doing here, it's building relationships and supporting relationships that can continue on throughout the year and can build organically on their own. There is so much opportunity for us to learn from each other, for us to advance the field together, for us to all build on each other's expertise to do a better job serving vulnerable children and families in our country. And so we're very, very excited about the communities of practice. We've had hundreds of people involved, and yesterday was, I think, from what I've heard, really exciting opportunities for people to get together. And over 300 of you attended, which is really, really great, and that's fantastic. We will continue to have upcoming communities of practice, and if we can get to a point where MCV is reauthorized, we are hoping we'll be able to think about perhaps a new community of practice. And that will arise organically as well from what people are interested in and want to work on. So again, we have, please stay involved with this, stay involved both on the app or in person, and we do have continued meetings coming up in the next couple of days. Now we get to the main event, which is, it is my privilege to have the opportunity to introduce our great speakers on our the beginning and the kickoff of this plenary. It's my privilege to welcome Deb Daro and Sacha Klein, project co-directors of the Pew Home Visiting Data Initiative, as they present the results and expanded recommendations preliminarily presented at the 2015 Home Visiting Summit. And they will be joined by Frank Dadone, acting president and CEO of Nurse Family Partnership, and David Wilkinson, commissioner of the Connecticut Office of Early Childhood. Deb and Sacha are here to share with us the recommendations of indicators in all domains, including parental capacity and child development, and to summarize the key lessons learned from the feasibility study. They'll also underscore the value for states in consistently measuring impacts across multiple home visiting models and the role high-quality data can play in advancing public policy in the area of early childhood. Please join me in welcoming Sacha and Deb.
We are all going to come up at one time. So you have us. Thank you, Diana. Thanks, the ounce, and thank to all of you who come year in, year out. Some of you are new, but you're going to find in this summit a real opportunity for learning. And I have been so privileged to be part of this event over the years, and I've really seen the field grow. And that's really what we can be most happy about, that our gains continue, and we learn from our mistakes, we learn from what we do well, but we continue to move forward, and that's important. What Sacha and I are going to, and our colleagues, David and Frank, are going to talk about is really data. Now, in the broader scheme of things, you can imagine starting a summit with data. Someone must have been on drugs or something when they picked this one. But we're going to make it exciting, scintillating, because at the end of the day, the idea of having data and having quality information about what you're doing is one of the most important things we can do to build a field. So as Diana mentioned, this is the Pew Home Visiting Data for Performance Initiative. We've been talking to you about this. This was an original effort of the Pew campaign on home visiting, along with their work on expanding state policy and promoting the adoption of evidence-based practices, their federal advocacy work, and they're really building their landmark building of the field. And what we presented in 2015 was the summary of our phase 1 work, which really was centered on building and about creating a uniform system of indicators around home visiting to really capture our collective impact across all home visiting programs and investments in a state. The phase 2 that grew out of that built on this foundation in 2 important ways. It was feasible. We wanted to test the feasibility of the idea. Can people really do this? And secondly, we wanted to bring greater clarity around 2 of the most important dimensions in home visiting, and that's improving parental capacity and enhancing child development. These issues proved a little more than we could take on in phase one, in part because they were so important, they were so central to the work. There was a lot of diversity in the measurement of these 2 domains. There was tremendous sense of interpretation about what it meant to improve parental capacity, so we wanted to give us some time to think more deeply about these 2 areas, and that's what phase 2 allowed us to do. In both of the phases, we were guided by a small number of key principles, and I just want to briefly touch on them now. We wanted to identify indicators that were universally applicable across the broad range of home visiting programs. This wasn't true in all cases. There are some indicators that most certainly fit better with some models than others, but we really wanted to zero in on those things that most early home visiting programs would agree were important. Second, we really wanted to document real-world, time-sensitive outcomes. This wasn't the Miss America pageant where we all said we want world peace. We want world peace, but in our lifetime, we wanted to capture some real impacts of home visiting, what was going on in the moment, so that we could, in our lifetime, document the success of this innovation. Third, we wanted issues that reflect what policymakers and the general public cared about. When we talked about some outcomes, we wanted people to say, wow, that's an important thing. We need to focus on that. We need to change it. We also wanted to look at outcomes that would potentially yield a substantial and substantive return on the investment of public dollars. We wanted to flag those things that we knew over time could save this country, individual states, dollars, and more importantly, we could spare children and families suffering. And then finally, we wanted, to the extent possible, build on existing data. My friend and colleague Fred Wilson often says it's not that we don't have enough data, we've got plenty of data. The problem is we don't use it. And so as we look to these indicators, we wanted, to the extent possible, look at existing data systems to see what we could build on. We were guided by an overarching theory of change. If you look at the far, oops, oh, okay, it went out here, so, but you can still see it, so that's good. On the far side of it, you see that we really agreed that most early home visiting programs is about improving maternal health and fostering optimal child development. To use a buzzword common in the field right now, this is truly a 2-generational program. We care about parents and we care about children, and we act in ways to improve both. To get to this destination, though, you go to the far side, and there are some procedural things that we thought home visiting programs should be doing. Something about consistent screening and referral for maternal depression and child development, and some important linkages of parents and children into primary healthcare systems.
Between these two poles is the middle area where we considered these were outcomes that we wanted to see changed in the short run. We wanted to see changes in maternal health behavior. We wanted to see changes in parental capacity, child maltreatment reduction, and child development improvement. Sacha's going to talk specifically about all these indicators, but I set this out only for you to understand the flow in which what guided our work in thinking about these programs. So today's focus is really to introduce our final recommendations on the set of indicators as influenced by the myriad discussions we've had around parental capacity and child development and our work in our pilot states. Sacha will talk specifically about the new work that we did in parental capacity and child development. Just to flag it, in the area of parental capacity, in our measures, we underscore the importance of having at least 3 perspectives on how parents are doing, both when they come in and at the time they leave. The parent's perspective, the home visitor's perspective, and then some perspective that's gleaned from intentional observations of the parent-child interaction. With respect to child development, we're not recommending directly measuring child development for children under 18 months for a host of reasons, all of which are outlined in our report. But we really want to double down on the importance of looking at that relationship between parent and child. Getting children off to a good start, getting them prepared to go to school, is hinging on the ability to have a nurturing caretaker guide their development in the first few months of life. Following Sacha's presentation, we're going to talk, David Wilkinson is going to talk about the role that states can play, state leadership plays, in really using data, how they can take the lead, and really how it's in every state administrator's interest to be more intentional about how they collect and measure the impacts of their social service investments. Then finally, Frank is going to talk from the model perspective, and Frank, along with several other it's from NFP, but NFP along with several other models are part of the Home Visiting Alliance of home visiting programs, and he's really speaking about home visiting models in general, how they use data, and how indeed they're improving outcomes. All of the material we're talking about is available in a set of reports that are available at the Chapin Hall website at the indication I gave you. The first 2 of these reports, the executive summary and a detailed report on the Home Visiting Performance Initiative indicators, are ones that I would really encourage you to look at. One gives an overview of our findings. We're really at the 30,000 foot level here, because we really don't want to bore you to death, and we'd like you to stay around. So we're just giving you the overview, but there's a lot of rich data in how we made these decisions and what we did. The second 2 reports that are signaled here are the actual detailed reports of both the pilot study and the process we did in developing our indicators. The last 2 reports are really a summary Excel sheet of all the measures we looked at, assessed on a variety of key components. So for those of you that want to go beyond this, you're really thinking about what kind of measures do I do for certain kinds of domains, either in the parent capacity or child development area. This report is very useful in that it summarizes these measures in terms of their length, their cost, their specificity, their ease of administration, and the like. Finally, I just want to talk about some key lessons that I took away from this effort. First and foremost, working on this initiative with Sacha over these past several years have really underscored for me that the idea of having a coordinated, consistent system for assessing the impacts of home visiting is within our reach. It is not easy, it's going to take a lot of work, but it is doable, and it is something that people have the will to do. And when you have the will to do it, that's the first step in accomplishing your objectives. Secondly, the maximizing of administrative data utility and building consistent cross-model data systems is going to require significant effort. Everybody's got will, and I think we have the technical capacities to use administrative data. In fact, our pilot suggests it's not the technical things that are getting in the way, it's the attitudes, it's the data ownership, it's some sense that if we do this, we're violating confidentiality in some way. We can do this in a respectful way for families, and we can use data in a way that's going to make a difference for families. Third, and I apologize to the home visitors in the room, but sadly, folks, you've got to tell the story. You've got to collect the data. There's a lot of things that go on in home visiting there is no administrative data records of. If someone's going to understand not just that wonderful, exciting case study that you had, the one family that you did great with, those are great stories to tell. but it's the details. It's consistent, descriptive data about the families you're working with that we need to have, and home visitors are going to be able to do that, are going to have to do that. They're going to need to collect the standardized measures. They're going to need to make sure that all the forms are filled out. I know data fatigue is a problem. I understand this is a difficult issue for many home visitors. But at the end of the day, this is not something we can eliminate. This is a critical component of your work. And finally, I want to underscore that this kind of data collection is good practice. It's not an alternative to good practice. It is what professionals do. Professionals document their activities and the impacts they're having on families. And that's something that I think I said in 2015, if you didn't want to collect data, just get over it. You have to do it. After doing this for another 2 years, I'm here to tell you that's exactly what you need to do. But think of it as your God-given gift, because no one else is going to do it if you don't. Finally, before I hand this over to Sacha, I just want to thank, this is too small, you can't read all these names, but I want you to understand this wasn't Sacha and I sitting in a room coming up with these ideas. We engaged people at every step of the way, beginning with the first phase 1 of this work, when we worked with our partners at HRSA. As they were developing and refining the benchmarks, we worked hand in hand with them to try to make that fit as closely as possible. In the course of our work, we've had data advisory board members, we've had key informants on our measures, and we've had our wonderful folks in the states that worked with us in improving our data collection. I want to thank all of them, and our entire team wants to thank them, because without this kind of consistent, generous input, we would not have been able to accomplish this program. Thanks.
Whoops. Well, good morning. It's my pleasure to get to share with you what we learned through our pilot test of the feasibility of states and other large jurisdictions being able to actually collect and analyze the performance indicators that were recommended through the first phase of this work. So as you all well know, it is one thing for Deb and I and others to develop a performance measurement framework, and Deb has shared about why that's so important and all the partners that worked with us so that we could develop that in phase 1. However, we recognize that it is quite a different thing to then turn around and implement that in the field, within the context that you work with from day to day and all the challenges that your organizations face, that individual home visitors face, that families face. So in recognizing that, let's skip forward. Part of our phase 2 initiative involved a feasibility test. And the goal of that feasibility test, there's really 3 main goals. So one, we wanted to know, is this common data collection strategy that was outlined in the phase 1 of the Pew Initiative, is this really doable for states and counties? Then we wanted to know if there are implementation challenges, and we certainly expected that there would be. What are those challenges? And are there some promising ideas about how to overcome them? The third goal was really focused on administrative data matching. So you just heard from Deb about the reality of having to ask home visitors collect data. But lest you think that we weren't keeping in mind this issue of data burden, one of our core values throughout this process has been, whenever possible, to minimize the data collection burden on home visitors. And part of the strategy, or what the main strategy for doing that came out of phase 1, was to use administrative data that already existed, often housed in other social service agencies, in lieu of asking home visitors to collect data from families whenever possible. We love that idea, first and foremost because of the data burden issue, but we knew that had some potential challenges associated with it. And so we specifically wanted to zero in on the extent to which administrative data linkage was a viable strategy for measuring home visiting performance. So we had 6 brave volunteers to be part of this pilot study. So do we have in the house Connecticut? Connecticut was one of our states. Iowa, small but proud. Hello, Iowa. Kansas, back over there. Massachusetts. All right. Oklahoma. Hi, y'all. And then the County of Los Angeles. Fantastic. So these 6 sort of states/counties were willing to let us test out the feasibility of the original set of Pew indicators and descriptive factors. And here's what we asked of them. It was pretty simple and straightforward. We basically asked, would you, over a sort of brief period, it was less than a year, collect the performance indicator data for the 9 indicators we originally recommended and the 16 descriptive factors for a cohort of enrollees in your home visiting programs that enrolled over a 12-month or 1-year period. We originally suggested they just pick a sample of sites within their state or county, and many of them did. Others did the whole kit and caboodle. And then we suggested originally, all we asked was that they pull data on a random sample of 50 families from each of those sites. All of them came back and said, hey, if we're gonna do it, we're gonna do it right. And so from the sites that we include in the pilot, we're gonna pull the data for everybody who enrolled during that 1-year period. And what that resulted in was a mixture of communities with all kinds of different home visiting models in the mix. So one of our values was not just to look at data for MCV-funded programs, but to also look at, can we collect this data for participants in home visiting programs that are not necessarily MCV-funded. So the models in the sample included Early Head Start, Parents as Teachers, NFP, Safe Care, and then a number of local models. So we asked them to provide the data, as I mentioned, and then we had one other specific ask, was that they, for at least one of the indicators, attempt or make a good faith effort to collect that data through administrative data matching, not through home visitor data collection. So here's what we found. With respect to kind of the feasibility of doing this and the challenges that folks encountered, we learned the following. One is that inter-birth interval, which was one of our 9 original indicators, was hard for many of our pilot sites to capture. There were a number of changes involved, and furthermore, the sites really felt like it was a lot of effort for a small return. Because in the end, it's actually, for most of them, it was a fairly small subsample of women in their home visiting program that actually fell into this kind of pool where they could actually collect the data from a focal child's birth all the way to a subsequent birth and the timing of that. So it was a lot of work without a lot of return. And furthermore, it's not a MCV benchmark, right? So you don't get that double return on your work there. Then another thing that we learned was that there was a lot of difficulty in capturing mental health services and child developmental assessments that occurred prior to home visiting enrollment. And yet the way we had originally defined those indicators, they were part of what we were asking people to collect. So not only was it difficult for home visitors to collect that, but again, it really didn't make a lot of sense, right? Home visiting programs are not, it's not really their responsibility to refer people who are already receiving these services. So it didn't make a lot of sense to include those families in those performance indicators. Then we also observed, and the pilot sites ran into this issue of capturing behaviors that are inconsistent. So a great example of this, and any of you, if you're past smokers, you'll recognize this, right? We had this indicator around quitting smoking. Right? The percent of moms enrolled who quit smoking. Sounds great, but the reality, like any other addiction, is that people quitting that behavior, it's not a linear process, right? So moms quit, you know, they're pregnant, they quit for a while, they come back, they quit, they come back, maybe they do a reduction over time. It's a lot more complicated than the way in which we originally measured it. And so that came up for some of our indicators. And then lastly, we learned that incorporating child welfare data to capture subsequent maltreatment was pretty complicated. So our child welfare indicator, by definition, requires administrative data matching. And that ended up being a lot more challenging than we had anticipated. So there's good news and bad news with this. I'll start with the bad news. The bad news is that in our very limited pilot test period, which was less than 12 months, none of our pilot sites were able to capture this data administratively, with the possible exception of those who already had these pre-existing MOUs with their child welfare agency partners. It really takes time to develop those relationships, develop the trust, and work out the formal terms of a data sharing partnership. And there is a lot of concern and fear, as Deb alluded to, around data privacy issues. That's the bad news. The good news is that every single one of the pilot sites remained strongly committed to figuring out how to do this. The feeling was this is just not an indicator where we want to ask home visitors to collect this data. It affects their rapport with families when you start asking, like, so have you beat your kid, in the last 12 months? It's not very reliable, right? Self-report on a highly stigmatized behavior is not going to get you the best quality data. And folks felt optimistic that it would be possible to get this information through administrative data linkage. It just was going to take more time than we had given them. The good news is for the 16 descriptive factors, the sites were able to capture almost all of it with relative ease. The exception had to do with some of the descriptive factors having to do with dosage and service duration. All right, so we are now going to unveil our revised recommendations for the home visiting data performance indicators. We took the feedback from our pilot sites. We had a Thank you. It's so great to have people excited about data. What is it, 8 in the morning or something? We got feedback from our pilot sites, and we met. We had a 2-day data camp, and we brought in representatives from each of those sites, and we had a really candid conversation about what was a good idea and what maybe wasn't the greatest idea when we originally put these recommendations together. And here's what we came to. Interbirth interval. We have now moved from being a required indicator to a recommended indicator for the reasons I mentioned earlier, right? So for some states, you have to capture this. Politically, it's critical. We think it's a good idea to measure it if you can, but if you can't, we don't suggest that you put a huge amount of resources into that. And the big thing here is we got consistency with the MCV benchmarks, right? So we want to streamline this as much as possible and not have you collecting things that are similar to a MCV benchmark, right, but a little bit different, et cetera. So this is not a MCV benchmark. With respect to maternal depression screening and referral, we made a small change, but an important change to this indicator. We omitted mothers who were already receiving depression treatment from the calculation, right? So that home visiting programs are not considered responsible for getting moms who are already getting treatment into treatment, right? Doesn't make sense. I've lost my slides. Postpartum health care, this remains unchanged, and we continue to recommend that states and counties track the percent of moms enrolled in home visiting prenatally or within 30 days of giving birth who receive a postpartum visit within 60 days following birth. So that's unchanged. Maternal educational achievement also remains unchanged. So we're recommending the percent of mothers who entered home visiting without a high school degree or a GED, who then enroll in or complete high school or its equivalent. The child development screening and referral indicator, very similar to what we did with the maternal mental health indicator, we are recommending a small change, but important change, of omitting children who are already getting early intervention and developmental support services when they enroll in home visiting for the same reasons. Then we have 2 new indicators that Deb alluded to related to child development. So not referrals for child development screening, but actual improvements in child development. So as mentioned, we focused on kids 18 months to 36 months, and we have 2 indicators that we are recommending now that states collect. So these indicators I should mention, because they're new, they weren't part of the pilot study. So we haven't had a chance to test the feasibility of collecting these new indicators, but based on the work we did, we are recommending looking at the percent of 18 to 36-month-old children who are enrolled in home visiting who demonstrate improved social and emotional competencies, right? Things like improved externalizing and internalizing behavior, et cetera. And if you see our reports, you can see recommendations around specific instruments and measures. Then we also looked at language development and improvements for that population in language development and age-appropriate language skills during home visiting. Right? And we focused on these two particular aspects of child development as opposed to motor skills, things like that, because we had pretty much unanimous feedback from measurement experts and people in the field on our steering committee that it's more important to measure a couple aspects of child development well than it is to try to measure sort of the whole kit and caboodle but not do a good job of it. And these two areas were seen as particularly predictive of overall child development in later years, and so that's where we focused. We continue to recommend collecting the percent of children enrolled in home visiting that got their last recommended well child visit according to the AAP Bright Futures schedule. There's no change there. Then we made a little tweak to the child maltreatment indicator. So note, we continue to recommend this indicator, which is an administrative data linkage indicator, but we changed the original recommendation to focus on kids who were reported to Child Protective Services for suspected maltreatment to instead focus on the children who CPS investigated for suspected child maltreatment. By making that change, it puts us in alignment with the MCV benchmark. And then here's the one that's probably the most different, certainly from the MCV benchmark and also different from what we had originally recommended, and that has to do with smoking and tobacco use. So in this case, when it came to quitting, we narrowed the indicator to focus specifically on pregnant moms enrolled in home visiting, not moms of all kinds, but specifically moms who are pregnant. And then we added another indicator, which was the percent of moms in home visiting who reduce the amount of smoking or tobacco use that they're doing. So this is more of a harm reduction, a measurement approach. Breastfeeding was controversial. Our original indicator was to measure this at 3 months. The MCV benchmark asks to measure it at 6 months. Our pilot study, the feedback we got was that 3 months seemed to make a lot more sense given the families that we tend to work with who are often low income. They're in jobs that really don't facilitate pumping and things of this sort. But nobody wanted to do double duty and collect it at 6 months and at 3 months. So to get alignment with MCV, we're recommending for now moving to 6 months, but it's our hope that the next time we have the benchmarks revised, that they would consider moving it back to 3 months. But for now, it's aligned with MCV. And then we had a series of new measures related to measuring parental capacity. These are the ones that Deb referred to. So the percent of families enrolled in home visiting who report improvement in mobilizing resources, the percent of families in home visiting who report improved parent-child behaviors. So these are the family self-report. Percent of families enrolled in home visiting who report improvement in the quality of their child rearing environment. For those of you who are familiar with the home scale, that's essentially what we're talking about, the brief version. Percent of mothers enrolled in home visiting who demonstrate improved capacity to meet their children's needs. And the percent of mothers in home visiting who demonstrate more frequent parent-child interactions. So that's the FAST review of those changes and recommendations. I will mention that we did suggest a couple changes to the descriptive factors as well. We recommend eliminating the number of home visiting, basically all the descriptive factors that had to do with average caseloads, average supervisor to child ratio, things that talked about the model itself. That was difficult for states and counties to collect. And so we have eliminated them from our list. And then we've added a little bit more specificity to some of the other demographic indicators. So we had recommended, for instance, tracking race and ethnicity, but we hadn't suggested a uniform set of categories, right? And if we want to be able to talk beyond just a particular state, we need to have agreement on what the option set is, right? And that holds true for what languages we're going to count, the way we define contact with fathers, etc. So to end, I want to talk just briefly about what our next steps are with all of this. And we have a couple goals. So one is we have begun working with, and we plan and hope to continue working with the national home visiting models to try to ensure buy-in and alignment with these recommendations. We've had several of the largest home visiting models at the table from the very beginning with this initiative, and you'll hear more from Frank today. But we're trying to ensure that what the models ask of you are as in alignment with what we are suggesting as much as possible. Two, we're looking to improve the integration of home visiting outcomes across all early childhood initiatives. And this involves working with a number of other initiatives that are focused on data integration around early childhood and things of that sort. We are working to foster strong partnerships between individual states and research partners. So some of our pilot sites, they had great partnerships with, university researchers that allowed them to collect this data and analyze it in really sophisticated ways. Other states don't have that, right? They have somebody in-house. Sometimes those folks are incredibly resourced, other times they're not. So facilitating sophisticated quality data collection is of value. Continuing to seek alignment with the MCV benchmarks and conversations with HRSA. And then lastly, we're trying to work with partners to achieve federal guidance to inform accurate and reliable use of child welfare and other administrative data resources. In other words, we need governments at the state level and at the federal level to help us overcome these barriers to sharing information across data systems and concerns about data privacy. And there's some work that's begun on that, but that work needs to continue so that home visiting programs can access administrative data in order to measure outcomes. And I'll pause there. Now give you a chance to hear from a state about what all of this has looked like on the ground in the state of Connecticut. Dave.
Thank you so much, Sacha. Well, Deb promised that this would be exciting and scintillating, and Sacha managed to make 19 8-cell tables exciting and scintillating. So I'm just going to try to keep up with that pace. I'm really glad to be with all of you here today, and hello to my Connecticut team. We were so proud to be one of the Pew Data Initiative pilot sites. And I think it's an incredibly exciting thing, and I'll share a little bit with you about why I think that is. But first I'm going to be data-driven myself and set the timer so I don't mess things up. Okay. Great. The slide's where it's supposed to be. So in my last role, I came to be really excited about data. I worked in the prior administration in the White House, running an office called the White House Office of Social Innovation. And our job was to find what works and make it work for more people. So we focused a lot on data, a lot on evidence-based policy, and our core mission was to help make the social sector more outcomes-driven. After all, that's the reason we make these investments. And so, of course, as you can imagine, I wasn't a home visiting expert, but home visiting quickly became my favorite intervention because it is so evidence-based. The impact that you and your providers make is undeniable. So you can imagine at the end of the administration, I couldn't have been more excited to have the opportunity to join a state agency that includes home visiting as one of its key service delivery solutions. We also do child care, birth to 3 programs, and others, but I was so excited to be with this home visiting team, and we've done some innovation, and we'll do an announcement later in my presentation on that. I used to have the luxury of going around the country and asking cities and counties and states to be evidence-based, data-driven, outcomes-focused, cross-silo collaborative, human-centered, 2Gen, and all this stuff sound familiar. And so now I'm in a state and I have the responsibility of actually trying to do those things. So that has been the challenge I expected it to be, but thankfully we have a great team. And truthfully, home visiting is actually one of the intervention types that is best suited to be an example for the rest of the human services and social services sector. So what I used to say, if I was in my old role, is that we spend $800 billion a year on social services delivery in the United States. That's Mark Zuckerberg's net worth every 16 days. So it's nice that he's going to give away everything over his lifetime. We do this every 16 days. But what we tend to do is pay for process and compliance rather than outcomes and impact. But when you think about these programs, home visiting, of course, included, is too small a slice of that $800 billion. When you think about those programs, the only reason they exist, the reason they were created by legislators, the reason why constituents call for them, is to get better outcomes. And so that's what I believe we need to be focused on, and that's why I'm excited about home visiting really leading the way. But I'll give an example just to break out outcomes versus outputs, which is what we typically fund. And so take the field of workforce training. What we tend to pay for is how many people receive training. And that's what we track. What we don't pay for and don't tend to track is how many people get good jobs. But it's within our reach. So let's translate that to home visiting. We know that evidence shows that home visiting reduces high-risk preterm birth. We know that home visiting, evidence-based home visiting models, reduce emergency room visits in the first years of life. We know that some evidence-based home visiting models increase parental employment and economic success, and we know that it reduces child welfare system involvement. Now, I don't need to tell you why all those things are important, because you know that they're important. We know that our model, that home visiting models do these things. We've got evidence from historical studies to show that. But it is within our reach to, in real time, know exactly what we're achieving, know exactly what provider is achieving to what level. And the fact that the data is out there and we're not looking tells us that there's a tremendous opportunity to significantly increase our impact. And that's an exciting thing. One other thing I want to say about outcomes and data is that I deeply believe that we better serve our customers, and that we also better honor the work of providers when we use data. Rather than focusing on process and compliance and bean counting, when we focus on outcomes in particular, we better honor their work. They are our American heroes. You know they are working for salaries that aren't that great, with less job security than they'd like, and they do it because they believe in something, and I think we need to honor that work. And we do that by having smarter data. That is one reason we were proud to participate in the Pew initiative as a pilot site, because I really believe the future of human services is to be less prescriptive about all the hoops you have to jump through as a provider, and compliance and process, and that's a whole different speech. The future of human services is going to be about smartly identifying the outcomes. and allowing providers to pursue and achieve those outcomes and using data to affirm whether we're getting there. Now, smartly identifying outcomes is not an easy thing. And so that's why this initiative is such a big deal and why I think home visiting is really ahead of the curve. Defining the right outcomes isn't easy, and this effort is doing it for us, and it's really proving out, as we've just heard. There are two things that are important when it comes to outcomes. They have to be smart, and they have to be consistent. So, smart and consistent. You can understand why they need to be smart, and we've seen how smart they are. Let me talk about why it's important that they be consistent, and I'll give you two reasons for that. Without consistency, we're solving slightly different problems, which means if you find a breakthrough approach to solving something in one town or in one state, you found a solution for one state. If, however, we're all working to save the same problems, it's like we've got a rebel alliance out there, all working and hacking on the same problems. And we can say, wow, we found something great here in Arizona to reduce maternal smoking, or to address maternal depression, or whatever the indicator may be. We can better understand what's working, where, and for whom, and then test solutions together, and thereby rapidly accelerate the pace of learning for the communities we're serving. And that is a really powerful thing. And there's many ways that data can help us learn. So I'll give you the second reason that data is, that consistency is important in a moment, but I want to give you some examples from other fields in terms of how data is important. So one is smarter dashboards to make work more rewarding, counting the things that matter to the providers. Another is better case management. In Santa Clara County, California, they linked data on, and so this will be administrative data examples from other fields. They linked data on homeless superutilizers with mental health issues, which most homeless superutilizers have. And they link the data across the criminal justice system, shelter use, emergency room visits, and case managers had that data in real time. So every time Frank went to the emergency room, case manager gets pinged. Goes to the jail, case manager gets pinged. I talked to a case manager about this. She said, yeah, I used to see Frank, on the corner 2 months later, and he said, yeah, I think I was in the emergency room a couple times. Now she can intervene immediately. Data can help us be really, deliver better precision services and smarter case management. It can also help us with pattern recognition that help us understand that certain approaches work well or don't with certain populations. That's a very exciting thing. And it can help us with predictive analytics. And so I'll give the example of Oregon, where they looked at 10 years of birth records. Who's from Oregon? Okay, we need, oh, there we go, excellent. In Oregon, OHSU looked at 10 years of birth records. And birth certificates, and link that to the child welfare system. And there's 17 data points on birth records. They linked those, and they found the 1% of parents that have a 40% likelihood of losing their children to the child welfare system. Well, when we have limited home visiting resources and other supportive services, it really helps us to be able to smart target our resources to those who are most at risk. So these are the sorts of things that we can do with administrative data. And when we think about home visiting and what past experiences in a parent's life might correlate with challenges at achieving, for instance, some of the McVie benchmarks or some of the Pew, some of these really exciting data indicators, histories of trauma or challenges with literacy, et cetera, we can be smarter about the services we're delivering. And we can link with outside data in the home visiting world and look at, for instance, these indicators and what their long-term effects are on administrative indicators, whether they're health outcomes, kindergarten readiness, child welfare system involvement, parental income, on and on and on. We can be understanding which indicators have the biggest impact on which priorities. We can do more of what works and less of what doesn't by looking at the data. So I'll quickly say the second reason that looking at administrative data is important, and not just administrative, and program data. Administrative data is a good thing to think of. It's often the tip of the spear. If someone lands in jail, that's an administrative data point. A lot of things happen in their life before that. What's really exciting about these programmatic data elements is they're helping us identify the predictors and the most important things to help set folks off on the right path. So what's a second reason that it's important to have consistent standards across home visiting? How many of you think that we have enough home visiting in the country, enough evidence-based home visiting? How many would like to see more? Okay, that's good. That's everybody. Don't forget the McVie push that we heard from Dr. Rauner before. I think that obviously we don't. We need to better tell our story, as Deb said. So having a consistent impact and having a consistent story to tell not helps us get better faster, but it helps us make the case. There's not footnotes, oh, well, this one does this and that one does that. We can have a compelling, consistent, powerful case to make, singing off the same song sheet, and undeniably assert the value proposition of home visiting. That's what consistency helps us do. Even if parental capacity and screening rates don't matter to a particular legislature, the system's outcomes and the administrative data that those indicators lead to absolutely will. So if we are data-driven in a system with consistency, we will be in a position to tell our story. And our story is the best thing we have to increase investment in home visiting. So that is an exciting thing, I think, to be aware of when we think about consistency. And I want to now, I get the opportunity. We're not usually in front of 750 people in Connecticut, and so I get to make an announcement. So this is an announcement about something new that we're doing. The press release, since I'm talking about this right now, press release is going out right now. Soledad O'Brien is getting mic'd up on CNN. Katie Couric is interrupting Rachel Ray with breaking news on Good Morning America. We're launching something new. It's a pilot initiative, actually, and we call it the Connecticut Home Visiting Rate Card Pilot. We're doing this with all of our McVie contractors across 4 different models. We talked about the fact that when we pay, or my opinion that when we pay for outcomes, we better serve the communities and the individuals in need whom we're serving. We better honor the work of providers. We better tell our story when we can point to how our investments are connected to the outcomes we want to see. And so we're launching a pilot to pay for outcomes. This is a version of Pay for Success, if those of you have heard of it, where we are providing bonus payments, where providers are getting their core contract amount and bonus payments for achieving certain key outcomes. And I'll talk about just quickly, this was a struggle. There's so many great things to talk about in home visiting. We needed this to be simple. And so we decided to use those outcomes after considering lots of important things like maternal depression. Those outcomes that communicate best and easiest that everyone talks about when they talk about home visiting. We focused on full-term birth, caregiver employment, by the way, it's an average of $10,000 a night in the NICU, so it's a dollar and cents matter as well. Caregiver employment, safe children, and for us, so what we're paying for is both each family that avoids child welfare system, substantiated maltreatment, as well as avoids emergency room trips, and family stability. And so this is for our child first higher risk provider, helping achieve goals like attainment of housing, childcare, or treatment for something like maternal depression. In caregiver employment, we're also paying for maintaining and or attaining and maintaining jobs, as well as paying for enrollment in education and training programs. So these are modest bonus payments. It's aligned by risk. When you do something like this, you never want to be creaming. So we have an assessment we worked with our partner Social Finance to identify what population is high risk and which population is somewhat lower risk, and we pay a bigger bonus payment for each success, for each family that's high risk versus lower risk. Since Katie Couric and Soledad O'Brien aren't really interrupting cable programming right now, I'm hoping that you might consider looking at that little website right there that is conveniently shortened for you. You can also tweet that out or otherwise spread it out on social media, Facebook, etc. That's our hashtag. And great to include the HV Summit hashtag as well, and because we know a lot more people are following that than our rate card. But that's it. The notion of a rate card is we say, we're government. Here's the price that we'll pay for the outcomes that we want to see. It's simple, it's straightforward. I want to thank Deb Daro and David Willis and others who have given us counsel and advice and feedback as we've built this. And in conclusion, we'll be looking to, this is a pilot, so we want to align and connect these to the Pew indicators and to the McV benchmarks. We're testing this for a year with our McV-funded providers. And I want to thank our team, Lynn Johnson, Kathy Lanahan, Connie High, Jen Wilder, and Ashley Murphy for all working so hard to make this happen, and our teammates at Social Finance. But mostly, all of this data work is about the people we serve. The Pew Initiative, the McV benchmarks, ways to pay for outcomes, it's all because the people we serve deserve our best work and deserve our smartest thinking. And so I think that if we bring a relentless focus on outcomes, if we interrogate the data and interrogate our own performance, we're doing best by them. And that's how we'll really move the needle and continue to do so and make home visiting a great example for the country and grow it. Thank you.
All right, good morning, everybody. I'm going to hit my timer. Looks like we got about 6 minutes left. So I'm going to, my slides aren't as necessarily as succinct as David's were, but we'll go ahead and move forward. First of all, I'd like to thank Deb and Sacha and David for having me as being part of this, and to the Ounce for putting together this great event. Is this thing not on? I got to stay over here. They're holding me in one spot. Okay, so about a year ago, I was approached about coming into the home visiting space, and I remember thinking to myself, home visiting, why me? What do I know about home visiting? And as I started digging into it and started learning about the data and the evidence and the outcomes and the importance of the measurements, I thought technology. And I realized very quickly where my space was. I used to work for a small burrito chain, and I ran technology for them, and we grew it very, very large, national expansion, international expansion, and then from there I went into the government. And started and I was managed technology. I was the CIO for the city and county of Denver in modernizing and all their systems. So in trying to figure out how to modernize, the most important thing to do is to listen to your network. And knowing that our home visitors are the bedrock of everything it is that we do, it's important that we listen to them and trying to figure out how to make their lives easier. So one thing at NFP is we have an innovation advisory committee that's made up of 60 home visitors from around the country telling us about their challenges, but also solutioning, because they're the ones that are on the ground that actually understand what the challenges are, but they also understand the answers. And we do that in partnership with our Prevention Research Center. The next thing I did was I mean, that was already in place when I got here. But then I asked one question, and that question was, how do I make your lives easier? And I sent that out to all of our supervisors, and 50% of the responses that I got, and I got a 75% response rate from everybody, so to them I was pretty happy to see that they were engaged. It was fix the data collection system process. Make our lives easier. Our home visitors are out there struggling. What can you do to help? So that was one. And then spent time in the field. Over the course of the first 6 months, I was in 11 different states with my team, talking with nurses, probably over 100 nurses, trying to understand what their challenges were. Did a ton of ride-alongs from, going from Indiana to Texas to New York to California, and seeing all the different challenges that were out there and listening to all the great work that was happening. And quite honestly, it was quite impressive. But I did see the burden that was out there in trying to collect this information, and I agree 100%. We have to tell the story, but if the act of measuring has a negative impact on our outcomes, then that's not a good thing. And we consider our responsibility at the National Service Office to ensure that the people on the ground that are doing the work are focused on the intervention and building relationships with their families and not being burdened by pulling in this data. How do we make their lives easier? And then the other side of it is, too, met with our funders and talked with them and really tried to understand what their challenges were. And it was about aggregating the data and getting consistent data and how do they pull it together to be able to paint that story and tell that story. So we'll take a look at, initially, when I first came in, we also had, thanks to some generous funders, an opportunity to upgrade our data systems. Now that we are armed with a lot of what the challenges are out in the field, we started going down that path. So the first thing we were looking at is data collection. How do we collapse down our forms? How do we try and minimize what needs to be collected and still get exactly what we need? And at the same time, too, how do we remove paperwork? Can we move to mobility so that there's not multiple entry? There's not having to be additional data entry where there's potential for error and mistakes that are made. Also, storing and securing the data. I mean, what a blow to any model, to any intervention, if there was a security breach. And some people might think, you know what, we outsource all of that, and that's not our problem. But the reality of it is, should there be a breach and all of your client's information goes out on the internet, the name of the vendor will not be remembered in 6 months. It'll be the models. And it'll be a detrimental thing to us as well as to our families. Data integrity is another area that's critically important. And today, one of the things that happens is we have multiple systems out there. And trying to support our states and our funders, we allow them to use whatever system they want. We recommend that they use our system, but they don't have to. They may have complex systems that are all integrated. So what we do is we pull the data in from their system, and then we take care of it and clean it ourselves. So one of the things that we're doing right now is instead of bringing the data in and then trying to clean it on the way out for reporting purposes, we are now building what's called an intelligent interface. And we're allowing these third-party partners to actually send their data over, and we're creating exception reports and kicking those back so that we can get accurate data in a more immediate fashion. And then reporting. One of the biggest requests we get is customized data extracts, custom reporting, that type of thing. We have our set reporting that we give to help our home visitors and our supervisors and our states to be able to go in and see what's going on from an operational perspective and what their outcomes look like and how they can improve. But this customization piece of trying to ask over and over for different pieces does not work for anyone. So one of the things that we're also putting in is self-service and the ability to actually go and take your own data. It's your data. You should be able to do what you want with it. So we're providing that ability as well. And I'm already over our time, but if you guys don't mind hanging for another second, I'll get through this. How do we use data at Nurse Family Partnership to improve practice? One of the things that we're looking at is we want to increase retention. So we've been monitoring our retention numbers, and in partnership with our Prevention Research Center, we came up with some initiatives around that. And one of the big pieces of data tells you what works and what doesn't. That's really what it's all about. But the story comes from the people on the ground that are doing the work. And when we see that our retention numbers are not as good as they could be, or we want to make them better, we ask our home visitors, we ask our nurses, what is the obstacle? What is the challenge? And it was determined in the first 5 visits, trying to front load all the paperwork and the data collection was becoming an obstacle. It was becoming a barrier to building that relationship and developing that relationship with that family. So we were able to go in, minimize, and say, what is the least amount of information we need to take in the first 3 visits so that the home visitor can really focus on that family, understand who they were, and build that relationship, and we push the rest of the paperwork out a little bit down the road. And right now we're monitoring that on a regular basis to see that that has worked. We also have a fidelity index. We have multiple implementation partners out there. We have many different elements within our model that we want to maintain fidelity with. So what we do is we roll it all up into one score. And what that allows us to do, because we have limited resources as well, is to target those implementing agencies that are good to make them great. So we can really focus our energy there and our resources. And then another thing that we did was we actually put in a collaborative success plan, because let's face it, this is all about relationships, right? Every aspect of it, the home visitor with the client, and then also between us and our implementing agencies. And in this collaborative, and the key word here is collaborative. This is basically setting goals. What goals does the implementing agency want to set for themselves, whether it's around retention, or whether it's around nurse engagement or home visitor engagement, which is extremely important. Again, the bedrock, the foundation of everything it is that we do. But we also hold ourselves accountable. And we set goals for ourselves in there. And how are we supporting our implementation? How are we supporting our home visitors that are on the ground? And we measure that as well. And that's something new that we're doing, and we're really excited to see how it's going to turn out. And it's been embraced by our network, and people are excited to see it. And then another one, this is about being unbelievably proactive. So we have a South Carolina Pay for Success program that we're doing. In 2020, we committed that we would be able to reach out to 65% of the families that we bring in come out of low-income zip codes. Here we are in 2017, and we already identified that we were starting to fall behind. So we were able to react to that and start making changes and adjustments. And we made those adjustments and tried different things, and they didn't necessarily work right away. How do we get more of those families in that are in most need? And just only a few weeks ago, we finally hit the magic thing. We did a canvassing of outreach. We brought in our outreach workers that we had from around the country, teamed up with our nurses, did door hangers. We were out in churches. We were going to the shelters, anywhere we possibly could to find these families. And I'm happy to say about a week ago, we noticed that those numbers started going up because we've been monitoring it and keeping an eye on it. And it's an exciting thing. And that's the beauty of having this kind of information. So as I continue to whip through my presentation, it's really all about relationships, right? It's about the home visitors and the families, and that's what we support. It's about how the NFP-NSO, our National Service Office, is working with our implementer. It's all about partnerships. It's not going to work if we're not all working together. And then also with our National Service Office and our funders, are we listening? Yes, we are. Are we adjusting and making changes and getting better ourselves to provide you with what you need so that you can tell the story and be able to invest in the right areas to get the outcomes that you're really looking for in your communities, because that's really what we all want. And then it really comes down to all of us in this room. I look around and I couldn't be more honored to be here with all of you, because this is our opportunity to all come together and work together and find some kind of standards, best industry practices, and to tell the same story together and have a much louder voice. Look what's going on with McVie today. If we were working together in a much better way, we would have a collective, louder voice that would allow us to move the needle instead of sitting on a shelf somewhere. So that's how we roll at NFP. And I just thought I would share that with you. Thank you.